There was a recent study that was done among hiring managers where 37% said they would prefer to work with AI or robots than recent college grads. So if we just take that one data point and put it in the mix of all the change that's taking place around AI, we have to start to think about what does the impact have on talent development and what will happen to our high potential employee pool if we keep allocating all of our plans towards AI. That's one of the reasons that we invited Sel Watts, an expert in HR and culture development, to come and talk to us today about what's on her leaders list and what she recommends is on yours. I'm Bryon Morrison. Let's get to the leaders list. Sel Watts, thank you for being on the leaders list.
Thank you so much for having me, Bryon. It's so good to see you.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So listen, we're going to talk more about talent development today because obviously that's your area of expertise. But one of the great things about the leaders list is that the people that we talk to, they're pros. They've been through it. They've done it. They're building their own businesses. So I'd love it if we could just take a second and you give a little bit of your background for our listeners so they can understand where you've been through, what you've been through, and what you've done.
Yeah, sure. I would love to do that. So I started my first business in Australia in 2007. So it's about to turn 18 next month.
Awesome.
Yeah, about to turn 18 next month, which is really crazy and exciting. But so I built that from, the spare bedroom. And my whole vision was that I wanted to disrupt the HR industry in Australia. And I really wanted it to be a space where business owners really looked at HR as a critical part of them achieving their ultimate business goals. And so I had this very strong vision from the beginning, and then I just built it up and turned it into something that was, really great, and looked after my family and continued to grow. And we really secured our place in the market as disruptive and calling out the things about HR that we didn't like and that we felt should be done differently. So I built that team up, and then I got the business to a point where I was not really needed in it, which was cool. And I was doing just a lot of like travel and media, and I then fell in love with New York, and I wanted to see if I could make it here. And so this middle-aged entrepreneur came over here, dragged my 3 sons with me after a little bit of time of me testing it out. And the Australian company, is wonderful and is sort of my foundation. And then I started all over again in New York City to see if I can.
That's amazing. And it's one of my favorite things about you. I know your personal mantra, no plan B, and, burn the boats. So I am confident that you're going to do incredibly well in the New York transition and already have. But it's such a cool story to get yourself to a point where you had managed the organization and built the organization up so well that it allowed you to make those decisions and to try new things and to move on to whatever drove you personally. And so I just love that balance of, we talk to people all the time about how do you balance your personal desires and your work requirements and the work plans. And I just think you've done an exceptional job of that. So was there something pivotal that got you to a point where you decided you were ready to move away from the Australian entity and try something different? Like, was it just the fact that you could see that it was operating well without you, or was it this calling to go rebuild?
Yeah. So I think for me personally, I enjoy the creating and building stage, and all of this stuff I didn't know at the time. Like, this is all, understanding yourself later on. But I found that I would, when things were going smoothly, I'd sort of break it. I'd self-sabotage. I was constantly doing, experiments and, all these things in the business. And I realized that I wanted to be, I really like being in that creativity space, but also more on the negative side, I was really, really burnt out, and I had become quite disconnected in that I was pretty over the business, and there's a lot of things that I would do differently now, to make sure, and I share with clients to not get to that point. But I had really got to a point where I don't want to be here. And so I started traveling a lot, and the business was in a really good place. And so I started traveling a lot, and I was coming to New York and hanging out, and then I was like, I really need the challenge of people saying, I don't think you'll be able to do that. And that sort of really drives me. And I'd got the business to a point in Australia where I remember this person saying to me, I said, I want to go and try New York. And they said, oh, Sel, if anyone can do it, you can do it. And I was like, oh, I much prefer when someone says, oh, you wouldn't be able to do that. And I was like, I need a new challenge, a really big one. And I thought, if I could, like all the times I've wanted to quit over the years, it's like, I just want to see what it would look like if I could do this thing or achieve this goal. And so I decided that I wanted to see if I could, all well and good to be a great entrepreneur and have a great business and a great lifestyle in Australia, a really strong lifestyle business. But what about coming over and being in, one of the hardest cities in the world, and not only just in business, but it's just a completely different place to live. Yeah. So
you're a builder, right? I mean, it's inherently that's a part of you. And so that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And so as you've gone through that, you've built an established firm, you grew it to a leader in its category, and now how would you describe the business stage that you are in with your U.S. entity?
So the US entity is really in startup stage.
Okay.
And because, when I came here, I didn't know anyone. And so I literally had no network. And what I found interesting was that people here did not care what I had done in Australia. It's like my credibility did not make it over the ocean. It was all about, well, what have you done here? And I sort of expected that, I've done this stuff, I've achieved these things, so that's with me. I'll take that with me. But that wasn't really recognized very much. So it really has been very startup, and also everything's so different. Everything from the finance, systems here, like everything is so different to Australia. And so it's really back to, beginning again right at the bottom. And what's interesting about that is that when I did that the first time 18 years ago, there was no social media, and the way that you would get your business out there is you'd go to networking events and go to have coffees with people. And now you're starting to like social media and all these platforms, and now we've got AI. It's just like it's like starting the business in a completely different world.
Yeah, I can imagine. And so today, if we're talking about our leaders list and the things that are high priorities, what's on your leaders list?
Yeah. So what is on my leaders list at the moment for me personally is that I want to try and double the business in the next year and a half without bringing on any extra staff. So really implementing a lot of AI and testing that. So I would be happy to bring on another one, but at the moment I don't have any technical people, like any, technical staff. And so I could do maybe one, but I really want to see whether I can build a service business that has a really meaty profit margin, because we have all these tools now, and we have AI now. And I'm just very excited because, especially in my space of being culture architects, we're helping our clients with, the org structuring looks different. We're preparing people for creating cultures that, your values may just not be able to manage, AI, and you're going to have your staff that are take on AI and do really well, and then the ones that don't. And there's a lot of cultural things that are going to have to change, and that founders are going to have to adapt to and be prepared for, that we're helping our clients with. And so I'm really interested myself in trying to use it as much as I can, so I can see the impact it has on my team and our organizational structuring. And because pretty much everything that we have offered over the years has come as a result of me needing it as I grew the business, and I didn't have the leadership skills and I needed certain things. So I would make a solution for me and then go, oh, it worked, and
Yeah.
implement that in our clients' businesses.
Well, I think that's really smart. I mean, there's going to be more 20 to 30 million dollar a year businesses that are 1 to 2 person than ever before in the in all of our experience in business. So it's natural to start to identify that. It's also concerning, right? Because I also saw recently where there was a study done, a hiring study, where they talked about 37% of hiring managers would prefer to implement AI than hire a recent college graduate. And when I think about that, I think, man, it makes perfect sense to think about AI in that way, but there's an entire path behind that of talent that is not being developed. And that's part of what an organization's requirements are, right? Is to figure out like who are the up and coming talent that you're going to take advantage, you're going to be able to use and help grow the company. So that leads to what is on a lot of people's leaders list right now is talent development in this age of AI. And how do we start to bring along those high potential employees? And so I'm just curious, like from a consulting perspective, where would you start with an organization that is trying to understand AI, but also balancing this whole concept of talent development in this new age?
Yeah, I mean the actual talent development curriculum, if you like, is changing. So putting enormous amounts of time into teaching people to lead other people is not going to be as important as them being able to manage multiple AI agents. Like, it's just a completely different way of thinking. So even when you think about, well, what are the things that we normally develop people in, and a big area, because most of us are pretty weak at it, is communication and delegation and clarity, like clearly explaining outcomes and giving clear feedback, and all of those skills that we we have to learn to be successful. How valuable and how needed are they going to be when we're actually going to be focusing on how to manage the agents? So I think like this is really like I've thought a lot about what are the types of industries or businesses that are going to be really impacted. Like, everyone's impacted, but I was thinking, gosh, management training, like what will happen to that space? And but if we just go a bit before that, right now, if you're people are using it and whatever, I'm recommending that you start preparing sort of your AI playbooks of what is our culture around AI, and do our values help us? There's a lot of risk there with AI, and so what is our culture? We want to have one where people feel that they are safe to use it, for one, because people are afraid that if I show that AI can do this, then they'll see they don't need me. And so there's the fear of people using it, and then there's the fear of people that are not adopting it. And so deciding in your company, okay, well, what's our culture around AI, and what's psychological safety around this, and how do we utilize it, and what does it mean for us? I think is a conversation that like no one's got the answers. Like no one knows what the best way to do it is because we haven't done it before. But I think that founders need to and leaders need to start thinking about what they really want, what place they really want AI to hold in their company, and because it will need to have a place, and what does that mean for how you lead your humans that you're going to have and how they should feel about it. I think it's just it's such an interesting space. And the other thing is we do a lot of organizational structuring. So looking at, okay, the business is here. We want it to be here in a year, here in 5 years. And so what should the structure look like? What sort of roles do we add? And the career path planning. And we're seeing already that the structures are going to be much flatter, like a lot less hierarchy. Decisions will be made a lot quicker. So all these things will even just change the way the organization is structured and grows. So there's so many so many things like that. So it's not just I can save money on people by implementing AI, which I absolutely support, but there is, unless you are just you and AI and you don't have any people, there is now a job for the leaders to be thinking about their people and culture with AI.
Yeah, so a lot of the listeners for this show have, range anywhere from 100 to 500 employees. And so in that environment, like that business is already moving forward. I have two questions for you. One is, whose responsibility is AI? In those types of organizations, when you're talking to people about culture related to AI, who do you typically identify as the owner of the initiative?
So, well, firstly, I think, my space that I work in is specifically with owners, founders, so
Right.
not sort of CEOs. And so one, culture is everyone's responsibility. And, if you want your workplace to be great, how are you contributing to make it great? Because it's not just the leader and it's all their responsibility. But as far as AI, I think the founders must be educated in this space, not just how to create efficiencies and make the most of it for their business, but in particular, how it ties into the people. And I think that this is not something that can be handed over. It's not like you're implementing a new IT system and this person's going to own the implementation. Like it's not that. It's not a tool. It's it's going to be, it's like having another person or people, and they are going, that is going to have a cultural shift. Just like if you bring a new person into the team, it changes the dynamics. And so I think in this instance, the founder, for now anyway, needs to be really on top of this themselves first. I don't think it's something that you can just hand over to HR or, the managers. I think you've got to sit down and decide, like, we don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know how much it's going to change. We don't know, but most people will have a bit of an idea of where they think their industry or their business is going and how at risk it is or where the opportunities are. And I think founders need to be really connected into that.
I agree with that. One of the things that we've talked about is the AI triad, the identification of the vision, which comes from the founder, CEO, a chief of staff to implement that, and a CTO to be able to talk about what's possible and what can be absorbed. And so that's, it has to be a group, but I agree with you 100% that I think it has to be led by the leader of the organization to define what does this mean to the company as a whole.
Yeah, and what does it mean to them? Like, where do they sit in relation? Like, some people are very particular about they don't want people to lose jobs. Others are no. Like, if I can have less people, I'm going to have less people as much as I can.
Sure.
So
Sure.
it's they also need to think about, like, where does it sit with them, and how do they want it to play a role in their, lives or business. I think there's more thinking about it than people realize in this space of like culture and values and all of that. I think that we haven't been talking enough about thinking about these things, and founders taking a moment to think about this stuff.
Yeah, well, it's kind of crazy if you're not, but I think organizations are all starting to realize that. So now the question just becomes, okay, but how do I actually do it? And so if I have a couple hundred people and I know that, there may be opportunities to be able to work with fewer people, or I might be able to expand my business faster by using the talent I have, what would you say are the best things to consider for developing talent? If I have that on my list of, I'm already moving on AI, I already know I'm going to do that, but I still have exceptional talent and I want to get the most out of them, what would be your recommendations on what I put on my leaders list first, to start thinking about talent development and developing high potential individuals?
Yeah, so I'm in a majority of businesses I go into, people know what to do, and they assume they're doing a good job because they don't hear otherwise. Well, they do, but otherwise. But there's not really clearly defined roles that clearly say to someone, if you are being successful, this is what it looks like. And so a big part of our work is creating what we use our outcome profile methodology to define roles so we know exactly what success looks like. Not only does that enable the information about success, but it also enables us to see where positions don't make sense. So, for example, often we'll see positions that have been, built over time, and if you actually look at them and what's expected in that position, you might find that it's sort of two completely different styles of people needed to do that role, in which case, someone is going to fail in some area, and then we complain that we can't find good people. And often the reason that we can't find good people, or people are failing, is not because of them and their capability or even your training. It is because the role is not actually structured and created to be able to be successful by one individual. And so I'm always, the first thing after, doing your org structure and knowing your values is to define your roles. And why this is even more important now is because then it helps you work out where you can bring the efficiencies in, because you can't really bring AI in unless you already have a process. So to be able to say, okay, this process can then be done by AI. So if you don't have those, so the other day I was working with a client, and I looked at their recruitment division, and I was like, and they were planning on recruiting a lot over the next few years. And I was like, this is so inefficient. This doesn't work. We need to really get AI involved. And I went and had a 3-hour whiteboarding session with an AI specialist about this particular client. And I walked out of there realizing that, we can't, because they've got no process at the moment.
Right.
And so I was like going through and going, yeah, but they don't know that. Well, I don't know if they do that. And no, they should do that, but I don't know. And my mate was like, well, you can't, they have to create a process first. And so that was really interesting. That sort of opened my eyes a lot more to how to think about when you bring it in. And so when you look at your leaders should have their roles clearly defined because it enables you to get success out of your people, but it will also help understand, well, where are the opportunities for the talent that you've got, and what are those skills? So is it the client relationships? Is it the emotional intelligence that it's needed for your particular service or product or whatever? What are those things? And then honing in on developing those skills and making that the priority. So rather than just looking at it wrong, go, okay, we're going to train you to be a better employee. It's like waste of time and money. So being really specific about what is good talent. So we're saying, oh, we've got really great talent. Well, what is that in your company? Like, what is good talent? Is it someone who can do what? And then focusing in on that for those particular people. And also, I mean, the other thing is that I think founders need to work out pretty quickly who on their team is not going to be able to adapt to this change. Because they are going to become exhausting if you're constantly pushing against people that are sort of defensive of or threatened by the AI or whatever else it is, anything it is that you're trying to change. You've got to work out who's on board, because we won't have the time to be fighting with employees about trying to get them on board with change and new things. We won't have the time. We look how quickly things are moving, and that's the other thing about the whole idea of like setting up your training and development plan for your team for the year. I just don't think that will work anymore because things are changing so rapidly. So I'm a big believer in weekly one-to-ones. They when done properly and people are trained properly on how to conduct them, they are so valuable. And I think they're going to become even more important because of the speed of everything that's changing. And, every week someone's like, oh, did you try this new AI that I found? Or like, did you know you could do this? I was talking to a friend, those sorts of things. So I think the speed and so regular connection and being able to go, okay, we need development in that. Yes, go down that path and see whether that's worth investing time in. Yeah, that's going to be happening a lot more.
Yeah, it's super interesting. In a smaller organization, I can easily see that. When you get in a larger organization, it's interesting. It's almost Ben Gaddis is a friend of mine that recently posted something about the fact that it's almost irrational to think slowly and to give yourself time to really recognize what AI can do.
Yeah.
But whether or not it's really making an impact or if it's a shiny object that we're running after. And so it's a really delicate balance to figure that out. But I understand your point about first identifying value structure. Everybody needs to understand that. But in the respect of talent development, I love the point of identifying what success looks like.
Yeah.
So this new adaptation and understanding of the business, that actually almost frames roles differently and makes you think differently about what success looks like. It's not a routinized position, because if it is a routinized position, you're probably going to look at ways to replace that. Because that's not the real value that the humans bring, right?
Yeah, I think a lot about AI taking over the lower level type skills and tasks. Where I have found it incredibly interesting in my own business for me is that I've been able to do much more meaty, high level, complex things now that I have AI than what I could have before. So I, as a strategist who is an entrepreneur and built businesses and has a lot of experience in my area, I will have these ideas, or I'll know that if we could make this work, that would solve the problem. In the past, I might not have known how to make that work. Like, I'll know what solves the problem, but I don't necessarily know how to create that. Now I'm able to talk to, chat or whoever and say, this is what I want the outcome to be. This is what I know the complexities are. How do I design that? And so I'm finding that ability to have something that can actually put my knowledge and understanding into real life. So I think it's important to consider, well, like, we're at more senior levels. This is not just about efficiency and getting rid of basic tasks. I think I have used it more so in more complex areas, but it's because I have the experience to know what the complex question is to ask.
Right.
So
Yeah. We don't lack knowledge, we lack wisdom. And so your experience allows you to be able to use AI as a thought partner. And I agree with that. I think most executives and founders that we work with, we're constantly talking to them about how do you set that up as a thought partner. But then once you operationalize the ideas, that's the part that it's not necessarily AI, it's automation.
yes,
And that's been
automation.
around for a long time. But your whole point about you have to understand what the core belief is first, how that determines your decision making, the processes related to that, those are all the upfront work that really lets AI play an important role.
Yeah, I think so too. And also, we just, I would say to any founder, or this is sort of what I'm thinking myself, is that um, I could change my mind completely tomorrow. So I could say something today to you, and then next week I learn something new or something else, and I can go, actually, no, what I said last week no longer applies. I honestly think things are going to be changing that quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to be really, like, I've noticed in the space of, people engagement, often people think that if I create this people experience or this review system or this type of culture and I drop it in, then it's done. I've dealt with that. I've done the people side. I've set that up. Now I can move on. And that's not the case. Like, you constantly need to be working on your people. You're never going to be the best leader. You're always going to be able to develop your leadership. And I think that now even more so, you're not going to be able to do some of the people oriented tasks and get them done and go, okay, that's done. We don't need to look at that for 3 years. Like, that won't happen anymore.
Yeah. It's funny. We were talking with a client recently, and they were talking about how AI just makes it feel like we're constantly changing the tires on a car while we're driving down the road. And it's such a challenge to balance the short term and the long term. How do you keep from chasing your tail?
I know. And I agree. Well, I was talking with a friend the other day. It's like, do you choose your tools and that stick with them, or do you try lots of different things all the time? Like, how, like, are we all just stop like shiny object syndrome, like overdone by 100?
The thing that we've used that I think is really valuable is this bimodal mindset, where you have the business running, your measurement around it, how you can keep that going and it's doing well. And so in that regard, you let that be consistent. You use the numbers and metrics that you typically would. On the other side, you start to establish groups that can test and consistently attempt to break or find efficiencies or move at a different pace. And they are the ones that are taking initiatives and challenging. So if that's that AI triad I was talking about before, that works really well. Sometimes it's, and this is interesting for talent development, sometimes it is a SIG, where I have a group that I pull together and I find, we're all interested in AI. And so I pick from different departments and I pull that group together.
Yeah.
And so, I think the key thing that you said was about structure and creating a structure that allows for innovation, allows for testing, but it has to be compared against, like the day-to-day operations, because otherwise everybody just starts to spin out of control, right?
Absolutely. You could just get caught up going nowhere because you're looking at all these things. I think that's going to be actually a big challenge for people. Like, you take your eye off the ball because you think we have to be on this, we have to be focusing on this. It's otherwise we'll be left behind, and then so, oh well, now I have no business left to actually.
Right. I blew the thing up while I was trying to fix it. Well, this has been so great just to be able to get your perspective on this. I always like to get, any parting thoughts in terms of talent management. If there's anything that I should have on my leaders list tomorrow, any parting thoughts or recommendations you would make just to get started, right? Because it's
Yeah,
about action, not about theory.
it is.
And any small to medium sized business, it's about getting things done. So,
Yeah.
any parting thoughts you'd share about how we can really expand the talent management aspect of our business?
Yeah, here's an activity, a little test for the listeners. So to pull out one of their job descriptions, and I'm hoping it's not a job advertisement, that you actually have a job description that is an internal document, and look through it and say you are giving someone a performance review on it, and they are not performing. Could you clearly show with that document that you've outlined what success looks like, and be able to easily say you are not achieving in this area, and it be black and white? Or will it be subjective? And they go, well, I'm doing that thing that, like, because there's nothing specific about it. That is the first thing, because in most cases it's not. I always use this as such an old-fashioned example, but I always used to use the example of on a receptionist job description, it would say answer the phone in a suitable amount of rings. And it's like, okay, well, someone could say, well, I did. 10 rings is what we do at home. And
Right.
well, suitable's 2. No, well, you didn't say that. But that, if you take that very basic example and you look at all of your things that you're asking someone to do in a role, can you have a black and white conversation with someone as to why they are or are not? Because that alone leads to so many things, opens up so much awareness around your business and why people might not be performing, happy, or you keep getting the wrong people. It's the starting point.
That's fantastic. That's great, super easy to do, actionable, and probably something that doesn't get done enough.
Yeah, that's right. So that's what I would recommend, doing that test. And then if you're like, oh my God, this is terrible, you just call me and I'll tell you what you need to do.
Absolutely. So we will make all your contact information available, and so that'll be in our speaker notes. I highly recommend everybody reach out to Sel, have the conversation just like we just had, because every time I've had one with you, I've always learned something new, and I appreciate you sharing all of it with the leaders list.
Thank you so much, Bryon. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sel.
Thanks.